Welcome to the Neijiaquan podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, meditation, and Qigong. This is our final episode of season 1. This week we discuss the death of Liu Hung Chieh. We break down the rest of the energy arts system, including the different Neigongs, as well as the martial arts and meditation components of it. We talk about our plans for season 2. And we break down the benefits of joining the Patreon. We're going to be taking about a month break between season 1 and season 2. During that break, we're going to release some of the interviews we did over the last year, give you an idea of what's on the Patreon. We have a bunch of interviews already recorded that are going to be going up during the break on the Patreon, so check that out. In addition to that, we'll have a Xingyi standing program going on. There's already a Bagua program on there, so check it out. And thanks for listening. Thanks for all your support for this first season, and we're looking forward to season 2. All right, take care and enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to the Neijiaquan podcast with Isaac and Jess. Today's a big day for us because this is the final episode of our first season, and we've been reflecting on how much fun we've been having putting these together and all the support we've been getting. So just to start off by offering thanks to everyone who's been a part of it and supported us along the way.
Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to pull out something else from another old magazine article, Fighting Arts International, around 1987. This is the magazine that first reported that Liu Hung Chieh had died. The next issue, they featured a cool in memoriam about his life. And there's a picture of him with Bruce that I don't think it's in any of the books. It's that one's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So I was going to read this just to sort of wrap up his life story and kind of put a capstone on all the stuff we've been talking about. Liu Hung Chieh died of natural causes on December 1st in Beijing. He was 83 years old. Liu was a classical Chinese scholar and an internal martial arts and meditation master. From the age of 12 to 14, he studied Shaolin. At 15, he became the last and youngest member to join the original Bagua school in Beijing under Cheng Yulong. Liu had 4 major Bagua teachers, including Ma Shijing, who studied with Dong Neijiaquan, the man who brought Bagua to Beijing and made the art public. At this time, he also began studying Xingyi with Li Yunshan, and subsequently with others, including Shang Yun Xiang. In the first all-China free-fighting competition in 1928, Liu represented the Beijing team in Bagua. Partly as a result of his performance there, from 1934 to 36, he became head of instructors at the Hunan branch of the National Martial Arts Institute. This was the last time he was willing to teach Xingyi and Bagua publicly. During this period, Wu Gongyi and Wu Gongzhao, the 2 sons of Wu Jianchuan, the founder of Wu-style Tai Chi, were instructors under Liu and taught him Tai Chi. Later, Liu lived and studied with Wu Jianchuan in his home in Hong Kong. After completing his Tai Chi studies, Liu spent 10 years in the mountains of Sichuan studying Buddhism and Taoism. He returned to Beijing in 1950 to take care of his family. In 1960, for 6 months, he taught Wu-style Tai Chi publicly at Zhongshan Park in the center of Beijing. Thereafter, he decided to only teach a few selected individuals in his home. Indeed, traditionally in old China, many of the top internal martial artists did not teach publicly once they had reached the master level. Liu continued his own daily practice until the end of his life. In Xingyi and Bagua, he passed his lineage on to 2 disciples, Bai Hua, who now lives in Hong Kong, and to American Bruce Kumar Francis. Liu's Wu-style Tai Chi was transmitted only to Francis. So that's sort of the official notice that came out into the martial arts world back before the internet in 1987. When it was a much smaller world, you know? Wow.
One little blurb in the back of the magazine.
Back then it was so hard to find anything out about anything.
Probably had a circulation of, 300 people or something like that.
I mean, wow. It's like now everything's so connected.
Yeah, there's all, that thing of as these old masters died off, it really was the end of, that whole era. I mean,
that Boxer Rebellion era, that Warlord era.
These guys met the first and second generation of their arts, right? So I remember, Bruce one time after we did that interview at Sizzler, right? He grabbed my arm and he's like, "My teacher met Sun Ludong," and he made this big deal about how it wasn't a guy in a book; it was like a real dude that he knew, and
right.
It's just, I think, the context of having actually trained directly with and met these guys. I think
these famous historical figures are actually real life, blood and flesh men who you would know as a person. For me, as someone who loves history, they become like just characters in a story. And Master Leo knew these as actual people, and it's just hard to picture that at this great distance.
It's just a link, to that bygone era, as they say.
I wanted to drag something out of here that we might just comment on. He says here, from age 12 to 14, he studied Shaolin. I think that's what we keep running across this martial art, Liu Hung Chieh.
Right.
6 harmonies. That's perhaps where he met his friend Wan Lai Sheng, who he refers to in the book a number of times as participating in the tournament. And
I think the guy they learned from was a student of Liu Daquan's.
The famous Bagua master, Liu Daquan, so and that's another connection.
Yeah, it's this whole sort of interwoven thing.
It seems like the martial arts world is pretty small at that point. There's a lot of connections between all the different teachers that only later in time, 100 years later, those connections have splintered and gotten far distant.
Well, but that's what happens.
Yeah, that seems fairly natural. He says here he studied Xingyi with Li Yunshan. And I think that's someone we're going to look deeper into in the next season and start taking a closer look at some of these masters that are connected to Liu Hung Chieh.
Yeah.
That are active in the 1920s and 30s.
Especially some of the lesser known ones. I mean, not everybody, but if you've read about this stuff, there's a few characters in there that are fairly well known, like Li Kengyi and a few others. But it's nice to get into some of the lesser known ones too, because a lot of these guys had pretty interesting stories for sure.
So that's a name we'll be looking into, as well as he mentions another Xingyi teacher, Shang Yunxiang. He's a famous
he's
Xingyi
a very
teacher.
Famous teacher, yeah.
So we're going to be digging into his history and some of the history of the early teachers of Xingyi in the 20th century. And just find some interesting facts about them and go into that further during the next season. So we've been talking quite a bit about our plans for season 2 and what we want to do. We're going to start getting much deeper into some of the stories of the 20th century martial artists that are connected to this lineage, and digging into some of the lesser known teachers and some of their life stories, as well as the books they wrote and the principles they were teaching. So that's been part of the fun of season 1, has been learning about a lot of these older masters, especially the ones that are the teachers who influence opening the energy gates. I think in season 2, we're going to go further than that. Not just the teachers who influenced energy gates, but the teachers of Liu Hung Chieh himself, who are the teachers of one generation back that aren't very well known nowadays.
For us, it's about exploring different aspects of this guy's life and the teachers that he was exposed to and trained with, and just getting that stuff on record, because there really isn't a detailed record of who he learned from and what he learned from them and when he learned from them. I mean, Bruce does a overview of it, but he doesn't ever really give much about these individuals. So, like, for example, Leo's 2 main Xingyi teachers that he lists directly in the book, both of those guys have books, right? And so it's a fairly valuable resource to look those up and at least get a sense of, all right, well, this is at least a chunk of what was part of Leo's training, right? I mean,
right. We can reverse engineer and look at what his teachers wrote to get a sense of the kind of things he would have been learning in class in the 1910s and 20s and 30s. So at the end of season 1, I can sort of reflect that we've looked at the teachers, the teachings of and the life experience of B.K. Francis in his book, Opening the Energy Gates. And I'm excited to see what we'll find. There's a lot of historical sources that haven't been tapped, and there's a lot of really good stories to tell. So that should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, this season was definitely very focused on the Opening the Energy Gates book and the related materials to that. So it'll be nice to expand a little bit off of, just talking about that one thing for a while.
Right. I think, yeah, there's going to be a lot of other stuff to get into. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Stay tuned. So moving on to the final piece of the Energy Gates book, Appendix F, the Taoist Energy System taught by Bruce Kumar Francis. Taoist energy enhancement practices for healing, health, self-defense, and spiritual advancement. I remember when I first read this, I really loved this book because it had good stories and it made sense. But when I read this whole theory of the system in the back, I thought it was sweet. And ever since then, I've always felt like there's something about it that just makes a whole lot of sense. And it's been a while since I first read this. It's pretty cool. So he's talking about this complete system of Taoist practices. Master the energy of the body, core practices. So he describes the 6 different sets of the core practices. Then the next section is about improving your physical and emotional health. You learn Wu style Tai Chi short form and Bagua single palm. That's the health side of the martial arts. Then there's a section for healing others, and then a section for protecting yourself against physical violence. And then the next section, learn to evolve spiritually towards the Tao. So these are all, it's a vast system. There's so many different pieces.
Yeah, it's a very condensed system. So,
yeah.
He took the essential pieces of what he learned, and they're not the, like, for example, it's just the single palm change and it's just the short form to get you into the waters, right? At that point, you have the basic material, and then if you want to go further, there's the long form, and there's the rest of the Bagua changes, and there's the Xingyi and
Bagua.
Yeah, all of that stuff.
So looking here, he says, Mr. Francis is currently writing a book for each of these 6 courses, which he, to his credit, has been following up on over the years, but it'll be interesting to see which ones eventually come out.
It took 20 years for that, or 20-some years for the Heaven and Earth to come out.
So yeah, that one finally came out. But yeah, Dragon and Tiger, opening the energy gates, the joining of heaven and earth. That's the circulating energy through the entire body, strengthens, heals, and increases the elasticity of your joints, reveals the secrets of Taoist breathing, enables you to project energy from your hands for healing yourself or others. So that's the set that comes after opening the energy gates of your body here. Then on to bend the bow and shoot the arrow. Then spiraling energy body. This is a set that I think is really cool that you've sort of specialized in, and we've mentioned here quite a few times, and I think maybe next season we'll tap into a little more. It says spiraling energy body can raise your energy level dramatically, teaches you to master how energy moves in circles and spirals through your body, enables you to project energy to any part of your body at will.
Well, it's spiraling energy body really is the second set. Heaven and Earth is the third. Spiraling energy body is the the second part of energy gates, right? So in one sense, everything you do in energy gates is going down. When you start to go up and out, that's the spiraling energy body stuff. I mean, they're one set, just split in half.
The physical movements are the same for both.
Exactly, yeah. It's the same physical set, just different additional internal work.
So leaving Dragon and Tiger out of it, because that's sort of a side set, you could say that opening the energy gates and spiraling energy body form a pair in much the same way the joining of heaven and earth and bend the bow, shoot the arrow also form a pair. They both work with the spine and pumping the joints really carefully.
Absolutely. Everything you do in spiraling can be folded into energy gates, and everything you do in bend the bow can be folded into heaven and earth.
There you go.
And then the conclusion of the whole thing is when you can do all of those 4, then you move on to doing God's playing in the clouds, which adds an additional piece of what is known as Neigong, or the spiritual element of Neigong. And does a few other things that are pretty wild. But that's the set that came from Liu Hung Chieh. I mean, if you want to talk about Liu Hung Chieh's Neigong, that's you're talking about God's playing in the clouds, not energy gates. But energy gates is a necessary piece to do the working gods.
100%. Well, maybe we can look at God's Playing in the Clouds and these other sets in future seasons and future episodes. There's quite a bit to talk about there.
There is endless to talk about. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just to keep mentioning, the sort of the symmetry of the system. You've got this 2 pairs of Qigong practices that fold into each other, and then this third piece is God's Playing in the Clouds, which encapsulates everything else and is the vehicle for all the inner work of the others. I always thought there's an elegance to that,
It's a very well organized system. I mean, I think that's one of the things that makes it so understandable for people who don't have all the cultural contexts or just haven't grown up around the ideas of Qigong and things like that. So it starts you off on a very easy, thing, and then you progress and things get a little bit more in depth and deeper, and then by the end of it you're playing with the clouds. I mean, it's
these are rising up at each of these levels, and then you're finally in the clouds.
Well, yeah. I mean, the what was originally a 10-part and then became the 16-part Neigong outline that he gives, I think pretty much spells it out really well, which is, you to paraphrase, you start with moving energy up and down, then you go to dissolving, then you go dissolving up, then you do things where you're mixing up and down, then you do pulsing, and then all of these, I'm not going to go through them all, but the way it develops, where each piece is sort of built upon the previous piece, right? And that's where I think where a lot of people unfortunately jump around, they don't go through each chunk of it. Then you end up with these sort of gaps in your in your gong fu, as they say.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have a roadmap. I mean, it's an imperfect world, so doing them all in order is sometimes challenging, but overall, as you develop, you don't want to jump around too much.
So what I like is how he teaches this Qigong series, and then the next layer of it is to learn a little Tai Chi, a little Bagua, and although he doesn't mention it here, a little of the Xingyi standing forms your martial arts for health equivalent component, the martial arts for health component of the system. You have this nice foundation of Qigong. Then you learn this simplified Tai Chi form that helps you get this ease of movement and gracefulness. You learn Bagua circle walking and single palm change. It's really basic motion, but it helps make your body more vigorous. It's aerobic. It makes you stronger and flexible, he describes. And then, although it's not in the book, there's the next piece is Xingyi San Ti, which is a standing posture that you can hold and work on making yourself very stable and strong. It's not necessarily combative. None of these 3 are combative.
He wasn't teaching Xingyi when he wrote that book, which is why he didn't put it in there.
Right.
Personally think that the San Ti practice should come before the circle walking and the stuff with Bagua Zhang.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even possibly before the Tai Chi, depending on the person. And that's to so first you learn the Neigong, because that's how you know what to do, right? That's the mechanics, both internal and external. Then you learn Xingyi, because that's where you learn how to put power into your mechanics. You learn how to get some strength, some gong fu, right? Then you learn the Tai Chi so that you soften. So that the power doesn't make you, stiff.
Too rigid.
Right. And then once you have that, you move to Bagua, which is about being able to do things that both exist in Xingyi and Tai Chi and a few other things as well. But you've developed the fundamental skills through the other stuff that when you get to Bagua, you don't have to worry about hurting yourself or, going too far.
That makes sense. And to me, I like how he makes it sort of clear that a student should learn all 3 of these. You should learn the short form, you should learn single palm, and learn San Ti. Each of those is a weekend workshop. I mean, 16 move, short form is more like a week, but that's enough time to get you a nice solid foundation to work with. But you may not want to become like a Bagua master or whatever, but knowing a little circle walking and single palm really influences everything that you do. And it just gives you this nice, container for all your Neigong work as you go.
I think if you're the rare person that walks into it already knowing what the three different arts are, and you've chosen that you want to learn one from the ground up, then sure, do that.
Yeah.
But most people walk into it and they don't know the difference between Xingyi, Tai Chi, and Bagua. They just simply see the external practice when someone does it, and they either are attracted to it or not. And that's why Xingyi is not very popular. Is most people, when they see it from the outside, it's not very flashy. So there's not, this big exciting thing where you see somebody do Bagua and it's like, whoa, that looks cool.
Yeah.
So, it's that piece about what the person learning it is first attracted to, I think, isn't always what's best for them, right?
Right.
But like I said, I think doing the stuff with the Xingyi first really sets the stage. Just it works out a lot of the kinks, and not Xingyi necessarily, like you said, as a martial art, just the standing practice of it
gives you some boost. So looking again, this chapter is structured in such a way as you learn these Neigong sets to get yourself the foundation. Then you learn some martial arts for health to give you some structure. And then from there, it splits into what I consider to be three directions, where the student has got now a strong basis. They pick one direction out of these three to go, which is medical, healing other people, martial arts to protect yourself from physical violence, or meditation and spiritually evolve towards the Tao. Now, you can obviously do a little of each if you want, but if you truly want to pursue any of those three, that's like a sort of that higher degree in college.
Depends on how much you want to train. I mean, but I think it goes like this, right? The first choice you make is, which of the three arts do you want to focus on? Or do you want to do two of them? Or do you want to do, like me, I decided I wanted to do all three of them. And so it was a larger curriculum of study than if I had just wisely chosen one of them first.
Right.
But so if you make that decision, right, then you've decided, okay, that's your container. So let's say you choose Bagua as your container, right? Then once you have the container, you have to decide, what do I want to do with it? Do I want to fight? Do I want to do healing, or do I want to use it as a spiritual tool, right? And they all have their specialty, but all of them can be adapted to, once you understand the Neigong and the meditation, you can adapt it to anything. So that piece of it is more, they're all made of the same pieces. It's just the emphasis, right? So that's why learning the Neigong first is the important thing, because then when you're doing something, whether it's Xingyi, Tai Chi, or Bagua, it's got that underlying Neigong stuff to it. If it doesn't have that, it doesn't matter which one you
right. And you get these more complicated forms of practice as you go on that enable you to test your Neigong at more higher degrees of difficulty.
Yeah, and I would argue that if you're not going to do martial arts, right, if you're not going to learn how to fight, you don't need to learn a lot of the forms. The forms are,
Bagua single palm and Wu style short form is enough.
It's enough. I mean, you might want to add in something with a kick or two, but like that's a personal preference. But in terms of learning, it's just in terms of learning Neigong and learning the health side of it, the container can be a lot smaller.
Right.
When you get into martial arts, it's like you need all of these variables and you need all of these extra skills, because you're going to be dealing with things you're not going to be dealing with, and when you're just trying to heal yourself.
Well, when I think of our classmates, there's these three tracks of either focusing on healing, focusing on martial arts, or focusing on meditation. And for us, we've always focused on martial arts while incorporating healing and meditation as part of that. There's others among us who just, the short form's enough. So they just move straight into Qigong Tui Na and Qigong therapy and just get obsessed with that and really go deep into putting the healing ahead. And maybe they only know a few palm changes or whatever, but that's not really the focus. They're just really into the Qigong side of it. And similarly, there's folks who are way into meditation and don't do much healing either, you know?
Like I said, it's a choice. I mean, you can mix it up any way you want to. I think there's value in all of them. I think the mistake is to think that if you understand one, you understand the other without actually having done it, right? Like you can't never do martial arts and say you understand martial arts, and you can't never meditate and say you understand meditation.
Right.
You have to do it. I mean, and that's what I mean.
And if you want to know about healing, you've had to have healed somebody. You've got to like put in the hours with patience.
Body work, martial arts, those are the application, right? Those are what you're doing with it after you understand how to do it. So I personally think if you want to understand one, you have to do the other, right? That, as Bruce would say, you know, martial arts is just reverse medicine. So if you really want to understand how to break somebody, if you know how to fix them, right, it gives you both sides of that. And so the health stuff is the balancing act to the martial stuff, and the spiritual meditation stuff is the thing that keeps all of it from pushing your mind a little bit too far in any one direction, right? And it keeps your mind balanced. So how much of those you choose to do, that's a choice.
So one last thing to look at as we complete the book, Opening the Energy Gates of Your Body, which is one of my favorites. Here we are looking at the learning to evolve spiritually towards the Tao as one of the paths you can take. And he mentions a few things here that are pretty interesting. There's 3 different stages. One is to attain stillness. Next, you have a spiritual rebirth. And then third, there's the Tao, where each individual's way becomes self-apparent. But so attaining stillness, first you've got to have that Neigong basis and then do some of the martial arts for health. But then you move into these preliminary practices to quiet your mind. He says here, you transmute your physical body. I think that's the work of that Neigong. Then you gain emotional maturity. Then you use Taoist shamanic practices to tap into the energies of heaven, earth, water, wood, and fire, and use them as sources for your transformational work. Then you integrate them into your movement arts, such as Tai Chi and Bagua. So that's an interesting series of things to do. You can see how the Neigong's part of it, but also there's this shamanic side of it where you're trying to sort of, become one with elemental forces. What do you think of all that?
First, you deal with the elemental stuff inside your body. That's why it's a 5-element Qigong system. These elements exist in human beings also, right? Best example I can give is the fire and water thing, right? Your body has it one way, and it's the other way in the real world. So you have to flip it inside your body to make it match the outside world. And then you have things like heaven and earth, yin and yang. But that leads you to then having the 5-element practices, right? Which is a whole, huge thing in itself, which then leads you to, further practices that are based on other things like the 8 trigrams and all of that stuff. So it's a vast system, but a lot of it can be boiled down to essentially doing the same thing over again, but on a different plane, as opposed to learning new techniques and
new sets and techniques, right?
Yeah.
So he gives a second phase of spiritual evolution with meditation practices that focus on the middle and upper energy centers. I get the impression here now he's talking about the 8 different energy bodies. It says open your heart, which would be the emotional energy body, open your mind, which would be the mental energy body, then open your soul, raise and merge the energies of your body, heart, and mind to become one with yourself, awakening your true spiritual nature. So that's a lot like the psyche, the karma, the body of individuality.
Right. That's what comes after you've got the once you've done the 5 elements stuff and you're essentially a whole, quote unquote, whole being, right? Then you move on to this second stage where, as a whole being, you begin to work with these larger force, if you will, cosmic forces, right?
That sounds pretty hardcore.
It's all, to me, it's all very interesting, and I love the theory behind it, and it's my life's work to understand this stuff, right? But on a practical level, I think knowing all of the theoretical stuff doesn't really help you actually practice more. So you got to balance it with doing it versus just sitting around and trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, I like to see the system and the way it's constructed, and again, the elegance of each of the different pieces that lead to the next, but that's no substitute for doing it.
He presents it in the order that you would want to practice it. He doesn't give you the timeline, right? So you might read 3 bullet points, do this, do that, and then this, but that might be 5 years between each bullet point in terms of actual number of years that you have to practice to get to that level. So I think sometimes it's good to put into perspective that, these layers they're happening simultaneously, right? So even if you're just working on the physical layer, you're affecting all of these other layers. And so as you move through the layers and you start playing with different systems inside the body, the important thing is just to stay where you are and not jump ahead, and let it do its thing, even on the layers you aren't aware of. Because then when you get there, it won't be on some weird unconscious level. It's like you've already been there and you're not freaked out by it. But it's it's all very esoteric once you get past the physical body. So it's there's a certain amount of faith that you have to put into the work.
So I guess here we are at the end of the book, and I just wanted to wrap up with this final paragraph. It says the third phase is the Tao. As a newly born spiritual being, evolve on the journey of becoming one with all the universe. Unlike the previous 2 stages, this one does not require specific practices. Each individual's way becomes self-apparent. Each spiritual being ultimately matures and becomes one with the Tao as an immortal sage.
Couple more weeks till we get to that one.
That's a great way to finish it all.
Yeah, for sure.
No matter how long it takes, eventually all spiritual beings become immortal sages.
Yeah, I think that's the message there is just you'll get there when you get there. Don't worry about it. But yeah, it's
enjoy the path along the way.
Quite a journey.
No doubt. Thanks for doing this with me. It's been a lot of fun, bro.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And
all right.
Say it one more time that, every time we record, we think about the folks who contributed and who've sent us so much feedback and listened to our episodes. It's really felt good to get an amazing level of support that we never even envisioned from the start. And it's been really inspiring, and we've got a bunch of new things coming your way in this new year.
Absolutely. I mean, when we started this, I thought maybe we'd do 5 or 10 of these and we'd get tired of it and people would be like, what is this? But it seems like it's really going well, and I'm happy we're doing it, and looking forward to going for
great
longer.
Feedback. And just a note about the Patreon page that we have to join in. It's a couple bucks, and it helps us invest in new directions that we'll be talking about in season 2, bringing in more history, bringing in more text, bringing in more translations.
Yeah, there's three tiers to it, right? So the first tier is you just are supporting us with a few bucks a month. The second tier, you get early access to the podcasts, and the final tier, you get exclusive content that's only available there, interviews, lessons, things like that. So it's probably going to be where we end up putting a lot of the stuff that we're working on, like Jess said, with translations and things like that. So again, thanks a lot for listening, and thanks for your support. And
all right,
bro.
Until season 2. See you then.
Talk to you later. Hey folks, just a quick reminder, check out our Instagram for images of some of the articles and pictures of people we're talking about. Thanks again for listening, and see you on season 2. Take care.